Thank you very much for that, Erica. What you have really described in a nutshell is a life unfolding, if I can put it that way. I never knew I got up to all of that, but it must be true. Let us remind ourselves of the raison d'etre, the reason for the outpouring of wisdom through the Theosophical Society and other similar like-minded spiritual societies, which was so that between religious superstition and brutal materialism, the white dove of truth has somewhere to place her weary foot. I'm rephrasing, of course, from the Mahachoran's letter. Now, the theme is the secret doctrine. But let me say that for me, the secret doctrine is Gupta Vidya, Brahma Vidya. And Blavatsky's monumental The Secret Doctrine is a leaf torn from the invisible, unspeakable secret doctrine. The whole secret doctrine can never be written down in its entirety. Any book, however wonderful and magnificent, is a partial statement for the time. So I'm not going to be restricting my talk to just Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, monumental as it is, but I will be extending as well. So let's have a little meditation and move into the cool and quiet shade of Adya Alamaram. Every visible object, every abstract thought, every emotional reaction is but the symbol of an eternal principle. Every form is a symbol, and every symbol the tomb of an eternal verity. Through education, spiritual, mental, moral, and physical, man will learn to release living truths from their lifeless coverings. Now let's mount the steps up to the School of Wisdom, and we start with this presentation. Which is in two major sections. The significance of symbolism in the context of the esoteric doctrine, and most importantly, how symbolism gets us out of the prison of the left brain and getting stuck in intellectual concepts, and therefore opens the door to intuition. And with that overall background, some symbolic representations of cosmos and man in the light of the Hermetic axiom. So what is the significance of symbolism in the context of the secret doctrine? What is the secret doctrine, of which Madame Blavatsky's secret doctrine is an aspect, a tremendous aspect? So, as the great Blavatsky herself said, the secret doctrine is the thread doctrine because it strings together and reconciles all philosophical, scientific, and religious systems on the basis of eternal verities, universal precepts. So, science, religion, philosophy, and everything that's included in between is so reconciled. How? Because of this thread that goes through all these diverse systems. That's the reconciling thread. In science, the reductionist method, which is perfectly valid, is to reduce complex things to simple building blocks. But it blurs our understanding of the whole. The holistic approach is to reduce complexity not to simple building blocks, but to simple precepts that maintains the whole picture. So in this sense, it could be likened to an algebraic formula, which is virtually the words that Blavatsky uses, an algebraic formula, to provide a solution to any input variable. So what do we mean by algebra? Blavatsky says we need to learn the formula before summing up the series. Here is the formula, and here is the series. The formula is a complete general statement, so any chosen value of x and y will give you the answer, like I've shown here. And for this reason, working from the universal to the particulars, the esoteric science is regarded as an abstract algebraic formulae about the creation in the archaic stanzas, upon which rest the propositions and axioms of the mystery teachings. So in the light of this, all the diverse expositions of the perennial philosophy were written down from the Platonic standpoint, rather than the Aristotelian bottom-up. There is a sound reason for this. Difficulties are often experienced when we try and access things from below, that is, from the individual viewpoint, rather than from above, from a general or cosmic standpoint. From the standpoint of mathematics as an algebraic formula rather than the arithmetical series. Therefore, the effort must be made always to look down from above as though a panoramic scene were being unfolded. There is a great danger in becoming enmeshed in details instead of understanding the whole picture. For example, if the physical body is considered first, and then all the other 6 principles are piled on top of it, it becomes difficult to comprehend the significance of man's divine self, Atma, from down below. But when viewed from above, the divine self is a universal principle united with its originating source and sending its radiance through the 6 emanated principles of man's constitution, which are all linked with the self. Thus, man, from the standpoint of the esoteric philosophy, is an unfolding of consciousness and not, as we are told, an entity consisting of 6 separate principles, or 7s rather, which may be peeled apart like the skins of an onion. So this brings us to an awareness of the great dangers of left brain logic and the need for intuition through symbolism. So the logic puts us on the edge of a cliff very often, the cliffhanger of logic, I call it. It gives us splinters of truth at the expense of the whole. And no one put it better than Schrödinger, that we are so used to logical deduction, but in a number of cases, logic takes up to a certain point and leaves us in the lurch. And Alfred Russel Wallace, Darwin's great colleague, put it so beautifully that truth is born into this world only with pangs and tribulations. Let me give you an example about this. The prevailing physiology in the 17th century about the heartbeat was that of Galen of Pergamon, the Greek physician and surgeon in the Roman Empire, who based his ideas on Aristotle. And Galen held that the heart was a producer of heat, a convector heater. So after cooling down by the brain, the blood flowed to the lower parts of the body and was transported back to the heart by the temperature gradients. But the English surgeon, William Harvey, discovered that this was not so. But after his discovery, what happened? Even though he completely invalidated the Aristotelian Galenic orthodoxy, his ideas were born into the world with pangs and tribulations. The leading physician of the time wrote in a leading medical journal, you can see this, if a horse swallows water, we can hear the sound. But if we are saying that the transport of blood should produce a sound, this we do not perceive unless Harvey gives us his hearing aid. How can a pulse be felt in the breast? How a sound? Harvey says, from blood a beat follows and a sound. Well, he may be blessed and lucky in London, but we are writing in Venice and we happen to be deaf. And that's the leading Italian anatomist. Now just think about it. Mothers were holding their children to their breast well before Aristotle and Emilio Parisano and all the other physicians. Did they not hear a heartbeat? Such, my friends, is the sticking power of prejudice. This was the prejudice of the time. And it took 20 years for Harvey's discovery to be grudgingly accepted by the leading medics in Europe. And some doctors said they would rather err with Galen than proclaim the truth with Harvey. Another quick example, you remember Arthur Ellison, the great scientist and theosophist. He conducted a famous experiment to show that seeing is not really believing. At a lecture at London University, he asked the audience to levitate a flower pot by chanting Om, very simple. So when he snapped his fingers, he chanted Om, and the flower pot levitated and then crashed down. One side of the table was a physics professor. His mindset was levitation, load of rubbish, didn't see anything, and he walked out of the room. The other side of the table was an old lady, a spiritualist, and she saw ectoplasm lifting the table and the flower pot. In fact, what Arthur had done, it was a perfectly physical phenomena. He had an electromagnetic device under the table. The flower pot, the base was made of aluminium, and it did physically levitate. And the whole point of sounding Om was to hide the sound of the buzzer, that's all. But the point is, when the mindset says levitation a load of rubbish, you do not see it. The table was screwed down to the laboratory floor, but her mindset was ectoplasm, so she saw ectoplasm lifting the table. So whenever someone says, I saw the evidence, question it. Now, symbolism opens the door and gets rid of the left brain conceptualizing, because a symbol is something such as a figure or a character regarded as typifying something else, especially in the nature of an idea or quality. Musical notation, the chemical elements are obvious examples, but there is a deeper aspect. Symbolism is the pictorial representation of an idea or thought. Archaic or primordial writing initially had no characters, but a symbol generally stood for the whole phrase or sentence. So a symbol is thus a recorded parable, and a parable a spoken symbol. So for the student of theosophy, symbols are a most potent means of unlocking hidden depths of meaning and releasing intuition. And the reason is that the meaning attaching to a symbol may be taken and understood at many levels: physical, of course, intellectual, spiritual, and what is revealed is entirely dependent on the context and, crucially, the degree of awakened intuition of the seeker. Now, what is this? A symbol or an icon? An icon has a fixed meaning. Red is red, green means go forward. Well, amber, there's a bit of ambiguity. But anyway, an icon is not a symbol. An icon has a fixed meaning. A symbol operates on many levels. Here is a wonderful symbol of cosmos. The Bebine table of Isis. In Gallery 2 of the Museum of Antiquity at Turin rests this Bebine tablet of Isis, an elaborate tablet of bronze with enamel and silver inlay, depicting the various Egyptian gods and goddesses, but emulating the Roman style, the Egyptian style. Most significantly, the symbol of Isis is placed in the center of the tablet, representing the all-containing universal idea occurring in several different forms. It teaches, in the first place, the whole constitution of the threefold world: archetypal, intellectual, and sensible. The supreme deity is shown moving from the center to the circumference of a universal made up of both sensible and inanimate things, all of which are animated and agitated by one supreme power. In the table, we also see the arrangement and distribution of those divine creatures that aid the Father mind in the control of the universe. In the upper panel, we see the governors of the world, the spiritual prototypes. In the lower panel are the cosmo-creators, or the demiurge, whose duty it is to care for and preserve the principles of all things and sustain the inviolable laws of nature. So the Bembine tablet portrays the whole constitution of the world as threefold: archetypal, intellectual, and sensible. Whereas the Chaldean Kabbalah classifies the universe not into three states, but into four states, or planes, if you like: archetypal, intellectual, sidereal, and elemental. Now, are we going to get into our left brains and argue that this says three and this says four? No, not really, because in the Chaldean system, the intellectual and sidereal is subsumed into the intellectual in the Egyptian Bembine table. So the two systems are perfectly in accord. So if we relate this to the human composition, the microcosm, we can relate it to the spirit, the soul, and the body. And of course, we can categorize the soul in various ways. But there is no conflict between the Chaldean doctrine, the Egyptian system. They just categorize and view things in different ways, in different cross sections. Dare I say, let's move into Crete, Nosos, and walk into the historical labyrinth at Nosos. What does it mean? Let's leave the fixed stars and walk into this labyrinth, intending to be born on earth. We shall assume that we are old souls and we know our path in the life to come. So, in the first circuit, we encounter not Saturn, but we encounter Mars. For it is passion and desire for life, the force of Tanha and Trishna, symbolized by Mars, that draws us into incarnation. On our way, we pass the circuit of the moon, symbolized by the model body, upon which the physical body is molded. But the last circuit we encounter before falling on Earth, quite appropriately, is Venus. Here we are, falling on Earth. Now, why Venus? Because this planet symbolizes intuitive wisdom and insight, for it is said that just before birth, we have an intuitive flash of our life ahead. And not a near-death experience, but a near-birth experience. Now, as we journey out of incarnation, we have this near-death experience where the first circuit we encounter is Venus, and we hand back the qualities that the planets have given us. And we encounter Venus because we experience a life review of the life we have just lived. And then handing back all the qualities, we find that Mars, not Saturn, Mars, is the last planetary circuit we pass, because we must now give up temporarily the thirst and desire for sentient existence. So what I'm saying is the planets in the Ptolemaic system, as mirrored in the historical labyrinth at Nosos, indicate the order in which our life principles are activated as we incarnate, and the order in which they must be shed as we leave our labyrinth of experience, that is Earth. Astronomers have poked fun at the Ptolemaic system ever since the heliocentric system was discovered, if I can put it that way. The Ptolemaic system is not talking of linear distances from the sun. It is a psychological system. The heliocentric system is a physical system. The two are not the same. Now, what about the lotus, Padma? A very ancient and favorite simile for cosmos and for man. And the popular reasons, of course, are the lotus seed contains within itself a perfect miniature of the future plant, which typifies the fact that the spiritual prototypes of all things exist in the immaterial world before those things become materialized on earth. And secondly, the fact that the lotus plant grows up through the water, having its roots in the mud and spreading its flowers in the air above. So the lotus typifies the life of man and also that of cosmos. For the elements of both are the same, and that both are developing in the same direction. The roots of the lotus sunk in the mud represents the material life. The stalk passing up through the water typifies existence in the astral world, and the flower floating on the water and opening to the sky is emblematic of spiritual being. Now, the mud and the water provide stability in different ways. If the roots had no mud to cling to, then the plant would just float away down the river or the pond. So the mud provides structural stability. But if the stem of the plant growing up had no water for the flower to float on, then the stalk or the stem would just keel over. It would bend over. So the water provides emotional stability to the plant. So during the formative stages of a flower, the bud opens first and is fully protected by the leaves on the other side. But then as the bloom opens, the outer coverings are the first to unfold, and they are represented by the outermost sheath, typifying man's physical body, and the color is brown, which I haven't shown here, it's black. The largest petals represent the Linga Sharira, the etheric double or model body, the pattern on which the physical body is formed, and their color is violet. Next, petals with orange representation stands for prana, the life force. Then comes kama, the motivating desire principle, depicted by petals with an obvious color representation of red. Now, most importantly, the next petals represent manas, the mind principle, but see how this petal is almost completely enfolded by kama, which depicts the fact that for the vast majority of humans, the principle of desire dominates the mind. Desire-driven thoughts largely dominate and control a person's life. Bodhi, the intuition principle, is portrayed by the innermost petals of the blossom, and they are most important for they enwrap the seed pod lying at the heart of every blossom, and they remain, representing man's immortal individuality when the outer petals drop off which represents man's mortal personality. And of course, Atma, the divine self, is the heart of the lotus, and the message behind that sublime mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. Within every lotus, a jewel is enshrined. Still staying with trees and plants, Ashvata, the mythical tree, or Bodhi tree, the evolution hypothesis of the Brahmins is embodied in the allegory of the mundane tree they called Ashvata, growing in a reverse position, the branches extending downwards and the roots upwards, typifying the external world of sense, that is the visible universe, and the roots, the invisible world of spirit, because the roots have their genesis in the heavenly realms, where, from the creation of the world, humanity has placed its invisible deity. So the Ashvata is a fitting demonstration of the universality of symbolism, revealing the key to the riddle of life and the mystery of man, because its apex is the mystic link between heaven and earth, standing for the root, while the base represents the spreading branches extending to the four cardinal points of the universe of matter. And it again conveys the idea that all things had their origin in spirit, evolution having originally become from above and proceeded downwards instead of the reverse, as taught in Darwinian theory. In other words, there's been a gradual materialization of forms until a fixed ultimate of debasement is reached. So the lotus plant and the mythical tree are, if I can put it that way, qualitative symbols of cosmos and man. A rather more quantitative symbol is the cube unfolded, the Platonic solid. The cube is represented by the cenary, or the number 6, and the cube unfolded represented by the number 7. And both are used by esotericists as symbols to represent man. Now, why should this be? In the quaint language of the Eastern alchemists, when the 3 and the 4 kiss each other, the quaternary joins its middle nature with that of the triangle. The face of one of its plane surfaces becoming the middle face of the other, and becomes a cube. Then only does it, the cube unfolded, become the vehicle of life and the number of life, the Father, Mother, 7. Now, the symbolism of this rather difficult commentary we can explain like this. Referring to the triangle and the square, we see in the triangle the two upright slanting lines portray the union of Atma with its emanation Bodhi, while the triangle is completed by the baseline manas. That's the 3. What about the 4? The 4 represents kama, prana, linga sarira, and stula sarira, desire, life force, etheric double, and physical body, the lower quaternary or personality. Now, kama represents the upper horizontal line of the square, which, when it's brought into contact with the lower line 3 of the triangle, kisses the base of the other, thus forming the duad of kama manas, or manas kama, kama manas. So this duad, along with the lower vestures, constitutes man's personality. Now, regarding the cube unfolded, a cube is a 3-dimensional solid bounded by 6 equal squares. If we unfold a cube, the 6 equal squares can be represented on a plane surface the 3 horizontal squares represent the triad, the 3, and the 4 vertical squares represent the quaternary, giving 7 in all. But note, the middle square is counted twice. The overlapping middle square is counted twice, representing, as in the quote, the kissing of the triangle and the square, the face of one of its plane surfaces becoming the middle face of the other. Now note that the alchemical commentary does not declare the 3 and the 4 touch, but kiss each other. The term kiss is very significant. A touch does not signify a relationship. A kiss does. If you don't believe me, try it with the person next to you. And the loving relationship is between the higher triad and the lower quaternary. Between the individuality, the immortal higher self of man, and his mortal personality. Let's alight on this thing that bedevils most of humanity, kama manas, and talk about the symbol of the lovers in the tarot card. Which is perfectly captured in Plato's teaching of the double nature of the mind principle. We all have experienced many times the pangs of conscience when we do things we jolly well know we shouldn't do. And sometimes we do things quite rightly. Now, why is this? And Plato said that psyche, the soul, the human soul, has a choice. It can either rise to nous, wherein it becomes the spiritual soul, or it can descend and attach itself to Anoia. It becomes then the animal soul. So the choice is, for the mind principle, the soul in general terms, to ally itself with Bodhi and become the spiritual soul, or to descend and attach itself to Kama, and it becomes then the animal soul. And the tarot card portrays this. The lovers, a youth with a female figure on either side. One of these figures wears a golden crown, and the other is attired in the flowing robes, and on her head is a wreath of vine leaves. And the maidens represent the twofold nature of man, the spiritual and the animal. The first, his guardian angel; the second, his ever-present demon. And this is so important, both love him. His ever-present guardian angel and the demon both love him, which is why this card is called the Lovers. And the youth stands at the beginning of mature life, the parting of the ways, where he must choose between virtue and vice, between nous and Anoia, if you like. And above him, in a halo of light, is the genius of fate, his star. And if the youth chooses unwisely, the arrow of blindfolded fate will transfix him. So, the symbol of the tarot card conveys the message that your vices and your virtues both love you very dearly. But you have to choose. And it reminds us that the price of free will, or rather the power of choice, is responsibility. Staying with the tarot and along similar lines, sorry, here we are. That completes the picture. The tarot card, the Judgment, symbolizes liberating the spiritual nature from the material sepulchre, the tomb. And the Judgment card shows three figures rising apparently from their tombs, though but one coffin is visible. Only one coffin, three figures rising. Above them, in a blaze of glory, is the angel Gabriel blowing a trumpet. And this tarot card reminds us that the liberation of man's threefold nature from the sepulchre, the tomb of his material constitution. And it is evident that the three figures signify the three aspects of a single being. For three mummies are shown emerging from one mummy case. And the threefold spiritual nature liberated from the sepulchre refers to the release of the upper triad, Atma Buddhi Manas, from the mortal personality, which happens upon death for the average person, but in life for the illumined sage. In a universal sense, the three figures, signifying the three aspects of a single being, are the spirit, the soul, and the body, comprising the tripartite compound composition of man on earth. On a different tack, I'd like to move on to the Druidic wisdom. There is a tremendous amount of symbolism and wisdom embedded in the Druidic stories and tales. One of the most notable ones is the symbol of a silent pool. And that silent pool is fed by 4 underground streams flowing out through 5 streams. The 5 streams symbolize the 5 senses of man, and the message is that man, since he happens to be born on earth, should and must experience his 5 senses to the full, but he must also seek out their silent source. What do the 4 underground streams that feed the living source symbolize? In the Druidic tradition, they symbolize the narrative of legend and folklore, the universality of perennial tradition, understanding man's personal nature, and the last one, which is the absolute bête noire for scientists, personal gnosis, personal experience. This is, in my view, a wonderful encapsulation of a timeless message. What about man? He has the 5 senses. How are the main consciousness centers in the human body symbolized? What is the best symbol for them? Well, we have the superior center, the higher center, and the lower center. The superior doesn't mean highest physical elevation. The heart, it is the spiritual source. The brain, even though it's the highest in elevation, is the second higher center because it provides the link between the superior and the inferior. The third center, the generative system, the lower center, is one of least physical dignity, but obviously of greatest physical importance. So here we have the source of life. Here we have the source of power through which physical organisms are produced. And here we have the link through which rational intelligence, life, and form are united. So obviously in the materialist, the lower center predominates. In the intellectualist, the materialist, the brain center predominates, but in the initiate, no one center predominates. It is a fine balance and integration of all 3 centers. When the lower center is active, children of flesh are procreated, obviously. When the higher centers are active, there is still a procreation, but children of the mind are created. Great art, great music, great literature, great scripture. So depending on which center is active, we have the physical production, and, let's say, the creative productions. Now, in terms of symbolism, the Neoplatonist Thomas Taylor put it beautifully. The first of these centers, the heart, is analogous to light when viewed subsisting in its fountain, the sun. The second, to the light rays immediately proceeding from the sun. And the third, to the splendor communicated to other natures by this light. So sun and light, universal symbolism. So the first of these suns, the heart center, is analogous to consciousness when subsisting in the heart. The second to the consciousness rays immediately proceeding from the heart to the brain. And the third to the splendor communicated to other human beings by the generative system. So the vital relationship between heart and brain is this. The old saying, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. So we can say, if we think with our hearts and feel with our brains, all will be well because things are in their right proportion. Neurocardiology, clinical neurocardiology, has shown that the electrical field of the heart, the magnetic field of the heart, and the electromagnetic field of the heart are several orders of magnitude higher than that of the brain. In terms of a very simplistic analogy, the heart provides the carrier wave, the radio waves that come into your house, your home, and there your radio converts the invisible signals into something that you can hear on your radio set. And here are the correspondences between man's principles and brain anatomy from an incredible paper by Blavatsky on occult physiology. Getting back to trees, a different kind of a tree. What about the Sephirothic Tree, the Kabbalistic map of cosmos and man? One of my favorite quotations from Schiller says that because the universe is a thought of deity, but this ideal thought has overflown into actuality. And the world that's born as a result has obviously realized the plan of its creator because it's an outpouring. And so it's the calling of all thinking beings to rediscover the original design. So in the glorious Kabbalistic terminology, we have Ein, deity in repose, deity emanating, and the boundless light. So deity in repose, deity waking up, and then the boundless light. Resulting in the macrocosm, of course, the divine and formless world of spirit, and the microcosm, Atma, the divine self, and the rays, the boundless light, the rays have emanated the entire cosmos and the whole of man. This is a complicated diagram that, if I quickly go through it in stages, we have the archetypal, intellectual, formative, and physical worlds. In the same way as you construct anything on Earth, you need an idea, you need an intellectual concept or a drawing on paper, whatever. You need to put that into action, and you need physical materials to realize the original plan. And that corresponds exactly in the microcosm to the spiritual soul, the human, the animal soul, and the physical body, all corresponding and correlated with the body as a whole. So I hope you found this useful, and I thank you for listening very intuitively.